All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christy Macero. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join the Office of Graduate Admission for today's hot topic webinar, Pandemic Lessons. First, I'll tell you a little bit about the purpose of today's event, introduce the Office of Graduate Admission, which is ironically just me today, and finally hand things over to our moderator, Dr. Barna Donovan, to introduce tonight's panelists and facilitate this valuable discussion. I invite you to take part in the conversation by writing in the chat throughout the event, submitting questions using the Q&A function, and sticking around at the end to see those questions answered. Tonight's webinar invites prospective students to engage with faculty about trending topics. The event gives you the opportunity to learn more about education and career opportunities in the field of communications and PR. My name is Christy Macero. I am the Associate Director of Graduate and International Admissions at St. Peter's. Now for our speaker this afternoon, Dr. Barna Donovan. He graduated from quite a few schools here: Rutgers University, University of Miami, and Loyola University of Chicago. Triple degrees here. He's a novelist and has authored 3 books on media and audiences. He started teaching for St. Peter's in 2002 and served as the Director of Communication Program from 2005 until 2013, when he began serving as the Director of the department's Master's Program. Without any further delay, Dr. Donovan.
Hi, thank you, and thank you for our panelists for joining us, and all of our guests to hear about pandemic lessons. And it's exciting to be able to sponsor this through our graduate program in communication and public relations, where we teach the courses, the skills that will prepare future public relations practitioners to be working in the field that's looking at these major changes, very exciting changes, new opportunities that we will be discussing here. So if you are interested in our program, like we're hoping that you will be, you can contact me at any time. You can email me about our curriculum, about the webpage of our department has a little synopsis for each of our courses. So we would be very happy to discuss the program, where it can take you professionally, and the kind of courses we teach, everything from public relations, of course, and the use of social networking for public relations, marketing and branding, crisis communications, all the way up to internship opportunities, and a final capstone project where you will be analyzing some pressing issue that really interests you in the field of public relations and business communication. So definitely reach out to me at any time. I'll be very happy to speak with you. So let me at this point, let me turn it over to our panelists and have them introduce themselves, because we have just fantastic real-world experience that they're bringing to this topic. So we have Lynn Trono and Bill Price with us, and I see you guys from I see Lynn first and Bill on my screen. So we can go left to right like we're reading
Oh. Thank you, Barna. Thank you, Christy. My name is Lynn Trono. I'm a Senior Vice President at the LAK PR Group, which is based in DC. I'm actually based in, working from Los Angeles, but my agency during the pandemic moved, or basically pivoted, where they had spent more than a dozen years in Rockefeller Center, and now it's a full-fledged remote agency. So there are no plans from our end to return back to an office environment. I relocated to Los Angeles after more than 25 years in New York City, and I have a ton of PR agency experience. Interestingly enough, I started my PR career in-house, and then shifted in my 30s to, I made a pivot in my early 30s to join a PR agency. I started off at Edelman in their tech practice, ended up at LAK from there, worked for Rubenstein for a number of years, and then worked in-house at a big law firm out here in Los Angeles. I fancy myself to be a PR generalist. So while I have a specialty in legal public relations and marketing, I also have quite a bit of experience in tech media and entertainment, and working with social impact. So some of the clients I've worked with over the years, big law firms, the National Office of the ACLU, the AP, Khan Academy, Code.org, Tribeca Film Festival, Partnership for New York City. So I'm hoping that as a generalist, I'm able to provide some insights, at least from, the PR agency side of communications. But again, thanks for having me here.
Thanks, Lynn. I'm Bill Price. I'm currently Vice President of Corporate Communications for a company called Zoetis. We're an animal health company, so if you've got a cat or a dog that you've taken to the vet recently, or you ate some eggs or drank some milk in your coffee today, we've probably kind of touched your lives in some way at Zoetis. My corporate communications or communications career has, just to give a snapshot, I mean, I graduated from St. Peter's in 1991, interned and worked at AT&T, then Lucent Technologies on the technology side, always doing public relations, in-house PR work. I went to Pfizer and then spent, then Johnson & Johnson, spent a number of years at Johnson & Johnson, where I became Vice President of Media Relations and oversaw all the global media relations efforts and social media efforts for J&J out of the corporate headquarters in New Brunswick, and was chief spokesman on a number of crises and corporate communications issues. I left there in 2012 to join Zoetis, which was spinning off at that time from Pfizer. And we were the third largest IPO in 2013, and have had a great run here in 2021 as basically the world's largest company in animal health, hitting our all-time high stock price and really serving a great purpose in the world in terms of the animal health needs and the connections that we have to human health. And it's always been an interesting and amazing story to tell for Zoetis, and very proud to be able to do that and help establish the company and our reputation in that place. And I look forward to talking to you about all sorts of issues and pandemic and otherwise today on our panel.
Thanks a lot, guys. So yeah, let's jump into some of the big questions that our flyer for the event was promising. And interestingly enough, Lynn, you touched on one of the questions I would have here, is that what part of doing business will the public relations industry would want to keep and maybe not keep in the future once, hopefully we're moving out of the pandemic as quickly as possible and life returns to normal. But for over a year, we've been doing remote work, video conferencing. Will this stay part of the industry, part of the business scene in general? Do you guys think?
I mean, for sure. I think that in some ways, working remotely and the pandemic has offered a deeper level of connectivity on one end, because people are actually able to engage, see one another in their natural or home environments. People are perceived as more human. So there's a general kindness or empathy that's out there now. I think there's going to be a bit of a blend. So for instance, just speaking of my own agency, for example, our leader had made the decision that while we are a remote agency, we are going to plan out in-person meetings and retreats, at least once every quarter. Majority of my team is on the East Coast, so I just spent the past, 15, 16 days out East, visiting colleagues in both DC and LA, as well as clients and reporters. I think that in itself, I feel like a lot of companies are planning, rather than a return to the office, more of a hybrid setup, affording more flexibility. There's been a shift in values as far as priorities are concerned. and people are trying to be as flexible as possible over the next, I mean, I see that happening for the next few years, not beyond, beyond the public relations industry. The pandemic obviously accelerated a lot of tech and innovation. Some of the more traditional agencies were really slow to adopt remote work. I mean, that certainly is not the issue now. If anything, people are relying more on collaborative tools, Zoom. There's a visual collaboration tool called Mural. People are using Microsoft Teams, Slack, Google Docs, SharePoint. I think that's there. On the flip side, I think, there are some pieces of connection that we are lacking. There are moments, for instance, when you're going to meet with a client or you're going to meet with a reporter and you're with a colleague. It could be, those moments where you're getting ready to prep for a meeting, or you have these mentorship opportunities, feedback, where you can kind of talk to the side. Those are things that are somewhat missing. I know, for instance, with the staff that I have, the direct reports that I work with, we have to actively go out of our way to schedule time, and it feels a little bit more formal. Trying to plan out these touch bases, just to ensure that we're communicating with one another. With reporters, it's been a challenge. One of the downsides to the pandemic is that a lot of the newsrooms continue to shrink. A lot of the reporters that I've been having to work with or reach out to, a lot of them, I don't want to say half, but a significant number of them are freelance. So they're not necessarily associated with one particular media outlet now. So it's a little bit harder, or the beats that they cover, the editorial beats that they cover vary and shift. So, it just places more emphasis on really trying to connect in other ways, or being a little bit more creative. I mean, now that people are starting to go out more, I think, reporters are more inclined now to do the background introductory meetings. They're willing to get coffee now or grab drinks, which I hope is something that we can continue to do. I think the in-person contact certainly is there. I just think that it's not as necessary, in my opinion, to have a day-to-day office environment, at least not for this particular field. I hope that's helpful in some way.
Sure, Bill, your perspectives
Sure.
are similar, or?
I think, when I think about what we're going to retain from this period, there's a few different things that come to mind in terms of lessons. One, I do think there's a greater sense of personal connection and empathy that people appreciate in this environment that I don't think is going to go away. That people, particularly like when I think of our CEO and other executive communications that have been coming across, right? We've gotten feedback sometimes even on recent town halls that, hey, like this feels like old school. This feels very scripted, right? They really, the expectation and the bar for more informal, conversational, and personal communications is not going away. I think that's going to be forever. I don't think we're going to see sort of a rubber band back to pre-pandemic types of environments and communications. It's a new world in the future workplace that we're looking at. I also think there's a lot more focus and conversations about health and wellness that are going to be true in terms of communications, right? I think there's a lot more openness and concern with people. These kinds of formal communications or technology challenges, you're having a lot more discussions about how's your week going. People are very concerned about burnout and things like that. And so that's become a real part of the mainstream conversation that not only in communications, but corporate leadership teams are having in terms of everyday concerns post-pandemic that I don't think is going to go away. I think that focus on colleague health and wellness is going to stay with us. And I think comfort with technology is something that we'd accelerated incredibly fast during the pandemic. But even from an individual basis of just, learning Zoom, learning all the different applications that you things. We jumped into Teams at our corporation, and it wasn't like there were weeks of training. It was, here's Teams, here's some tutorials, learn as you go and get some comfort level with it. And people really had to kind of adapt and enjoy that and embrace that and get a little bit more comfortable than they might have been when they could go down the hall to the IT guy and say, fix this for me, right? So there's a lot more comfort with technology. But I think when we look at Zoetis at the future of the workplace, we're talking a lot more about empowered flexibility for our colleagues and really trying and to embrace flexibility in that way. And that comes not only with the where you work, right? So allowing colleagues to do more hybrid types of environments or choosing to be completely remote work, or some colleagues that want to come back into the office. We're seeing probably close to, from our surveys, about 60 to 70% of colleagues wanting to be more so hybrid or remote, and fewer wanting to come back. And that's just office-based colleagues, right? We also have a lot of colleagues that are in manufacturing and R&D locations that have been there every day the last year and a half. But it also has to do with the when flexibility, right? So, having a set of core hours or accepting that people are going to get the work done when they need to and not necessarily have to be punching a clock. Our CEO, Kristen Peck, has talked about the fact that, like, look, we've been as productive or more productive over the last 18 months with the pandemic, and people have earned that right for flexibility in terms of the when and where of how they're going to deliver the results that we expect from them and from the company. And so trying to embrace that and give colleagues that opportunity is something that we're trying to define and learn as we go and pilot new ways. So I think a lot of great things to see coming at us from a communications perspective as well.
To piggyback off of what Bill was saying, I mean, I've been seeing this with my clients. Typically when people think of PR, they think of media relations, but we've been doing more work on on communicating across all stakeholders. And one theme I've been seeing with companies are, they're using technology to survey their own employees, their internal audiences, to gauge sentiment before making any big decisions. And it can be everything of when to or how to return to the office, or whether to mandate the vaccine, asking what benefits they want, to go back to mental, the emphasis on mental health, for instance. So employers are really inviting their people into the decision-making process. I actually was looking at, Edelman does this trust barometer survey every year. And interestingly enough, while there is significant distrust in government leaders and business leaders and journalists, when it comes to people's own CEOs, there's high trust there. So people are really looking to their employers.
No, it's true. That Edelman study did say kind of like companies are where people are looking for that sorts of, even on information around vaccinations and stuff like that. Trust their employers' information more so than government and other institutions. So we have a lot of, as a corporation, you've got a lot of things at stake in terms of the way you're communicating.
Oh, Bill, you're freezing up a little bit on my end.
Yes, here too. Let's see, Bill, can you hear us?
Acceptance or tolerance, but also colleagues allowing you to, and other audiences understanding that things may change and you need to kind of be able to kind of speak and come back to those points and revise your stories.
When it comes to communicating an organization to their publics, to their clients, and then when they go to the either the in-house public relations specialists or they hire firms, now that we have seen this major culture-changing crisis hit, for the future, and almost at the moment last year when at St. Peter's we went into remote teaching, I was telling all of my students, I was teaching this one class on business communication. I was telling them to pay attention to the to commercials on TV immediately. How soon is the pandemic showing up, and what are companies telling you to stay loyal or to use their services and buy their products because of the way they're reacting reacting to the pandemic. So from what we've learned from this really culture changing, really world changing crisis like this, what do you think PR will be telling their clients in the future how to react to a next crisis? Because I mean that's history that we've seen so many of them, and that where the world just pauses and it's in shock, and that how should they be communicating?
I mean, I think the core tenets of crisis communications don't change, right? In terms of being honest, being fast, being responsive, being credible, right? And directing the story yourself, right? Being out there, not allowing other noise to fill the vacuum of silence, right? So a company's having to kind of take control of the story with what information they can provide in a crisis remains a tenet of crisis communications all over the place. I think two things that I saw, I think more in a more sharp fashion in this crisis was one, decentralization. You were talking about basically a global crisis happening, flares and things happening in different pockets at different times, different hours of the day. There was no way, and I've been at other companies where you might have tried to be more of a command and control and centralized in managing a crisis. There was really no way to do that in this global pandemic. Things were too different in too many places and happening at the same time. So for Zoetis, we certainly had to really empower our local leaders, provide some general guidance, but trust that people understood what the company's values were. And we talked a lot about, we had three basic principles. We wanted our colleagues to feel safe, be safe, and feel supported. And everyone kind of understood those were the guiding principles for this particular crisis. And how they responded in markets had to be locally led by the managers and folks on the ground in that way. And the other thing I think this crisis was just the speed and the uncertainty around it in so many ways, which can be true of many crises, but this was just on steroids in terms of the pace of it and the uncertainty, how quickly things have changed week to week, day to day, and even company policies and approaches having to change, right? You didn't make a decision and stubbornly stick with it for 9 months. Yeah. You adapted and changed and explained why you were changing and took the feedback, to Lynn's point, from colleagues, from other stakeholders on whether you were taking the right action or you needed to change and recalibrate. So I think those are some things that definitely, in terms of speed and in terms of decentralization that I think will be taken to a new level in future crises like this in a global pandemic.
I mean, I think from my end, I would think that just being more attuned and listening. I mean, I think that's always, PR 101. You need to read your audience, know your audience. But I mean, I think, one of the first things that I had to tackle for some of the clients that I was consulting at the beginning of the pandemic, particularly, nonprofit sector, was, okay, well, which events and releases do we need to cancel? Which was, what's considered non-essential? If there were product launches, what could we hold? I mean, we had to do quite a bit of rejiggering. There was one nonprofit I was working with that wanted to release a study about, corporate social responsibility. And they wanted to release it, I think, in March or April of last year. And, I said to them, look, we should probably put a pin in this for now, just because, people right now are more concerned about their job. They're concerned about their health, the well-being of their loved ones. Those are, and it goes back to also, as far as any kind of messaging is concerned, when you're advising clients, or if you're in-house, when you're advising the leadership, just making sure that the messages are really kept simple and that they're human-centered. I mean, I think those are the main things that I was saying. I mean, the pandemic just added to fear. I mean, fear of job loss. We're hearing things about climate change, cyber attacks, just even just like the loss of freedom of any kind, everything that was going on politically. So situational awareness, I think, is everything, and just being attuned to all of that.
Oh yeah, jump over since we were bringing messages up to later question. I was going to ask that as I was mentioning that I'm telling my students to pay attention to how companies are presenting themselves, and they still need to do business. They still need to sell their products, but the pandemic is seeping into commercials. Did you see with the with PR and marketing really good examples and say very bad examples where the efforts at presenting the company looks very good versus really bad disasters that we can learn from where the company looks just opportunistic? Can you do you recall seeing things like that? I usually tell people it's easier to learn sometimes from failure and disaster than success. You see something go terribly awry.
I prefer to look at the positive. I feel like a lot of companies did the right thing. A lot of companies were placing more emphasis on what they were doing for their own respective communities, and thanking obviously healthcare workers and emergency response folks. I don't want to I don't want to necessarily go negative and point to examples as far as PR fails are concerned. I don't know, Bill, maybe you feel more comfortable with that.
Well, nothing immediately comes to mind in terms of like any egregious issues in that way. I think to that point, we immediately had to kind of talk to a lot of our brands around the world and say, look, we're at a different point right now. To Lynn's point earlier, you've got to pause what you're doing on social media. And they were looking for guidance. They're like, well, what do we do? Are we still doing brand advertising about, dog allergies and things during the pandemic? So we really had to kind of give them a lot of guidance on, guys, we need to really be sensitive, not be tone deaf in this time. And so we really tried to take a very proactive approach with our brands on how we wanted to show up that way. I think some of the best things that you saw was a little bit more. I know for Zoetis, we were very focused on our purpose, right? And you hear a lot about that now in terms of colleagues and people who work, looking at companies and reflecting and having a lot of time this last year to really reflect on their own personal values and wanting to work for employers or companies or be aligned with companies or buy from companies that really align with their values or really contributing to society in a bigger way. So for Zoetis, we certainly looked at the contributions we made to the broader public health in terms of, how we help animals and then help people. We sort of nurture the world and humankind by advancing animal care. And so we really kind of drove that home with colleagues this last year and helping them feel part of that bigger contribution that we make to society. I also think there's a lot going on in terms of messaging that you see from brands where it's not about the me, it's about the us message, yes. Right? So there's a lot, you'll never lose the idea of any product sale or any brand wanting to tell you what's in it for you, right? Any consumer is going to want to know what's in it for me in terms of this brand or product that I'm going to contribute to or use. But there's also a lot more brand evolution, a lot more companies talking about the what's in it for us. What's in it for us as a community? What's in it for us as the greater world? Whether it be talking about climate change in a lot of new ways and aligning products and things to that type of situation, or talking about the contributions we make to society in terms of being more equitable, helping those that are more in need. That kind of contribution or safety, public safety and health right now, certainly. All of that is where I think a lot of more companies and brands are looking at trying to be more clear and more aligned to and more recognized as making those kinds of contributions than being the fastest, the best, the cheapest. They're trying to align themselves and doing a lot more discussion of those kinds of values than they are just about product benefits.
Bill has touched on something. I wholeheartedly agree. you know, corporate leaders are being asked to really go into, like, use their moral compass to help drive the direction of their company or their brand, and the focus on ethical responsibilities, not just the ethical responsibilities, but also just ensuring that people are being seen across the board. I think that's been certainly elevated over the past year and a half.
I'm very glad that you guys touched on that, because there is something that at St. Peter's we're infusing all of our studies in communication, all the other schools to also as well to get ethical behavior and with us ethical communication and ethical business communication. So it is something that we're trying to do from our end, and it's very good to hear that it is something that translates into good business as well.
I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but as organizations are being forced to kind of rethink their words and actions, you know, if I had a client that wanted to really, because they were getting a lot of feedback from their employees. What's the company doing for the community? How are we getting involved? What are some of the causes that we're supporting? It needs to come from an authentic place. I mean, that's one thing. I mean, trust is continually being tested. So, our guidance to them was, okay, as we're picking and choosing ways to support the local communities, we do need to be mindful that it does not look too opportunistic, but that if we are going to be donating hours or supplies or whatever it is, that it does make sense or align with what the brand is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people just need to, companies are being forced to really take a beat, focus, and engage wisely. In order, yes, you want to be able to differentiate yourself and stand out, but it needs to be really, really thoughtful. It can't just be done haphazardly. And it's not a matter of just doing something to get a press release out or get an announcement out.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Oh, I just remember something from the the possibly negative behavior, which I guess was and honestly I can't remember the company, but it was something to the effect that was part of a commercial.
Sorry.
No problem. And once the vaccines rolled out, that there was some kind of a promotion that if you come and show proof of vaccination, we'll go and give you a discount on whatever it was they're selling. And I honestly I can't remember what the company was. I mean, in a way, are they promoting responsible behavior to go and get vaccinated, or is that just tacky?
Right.
I mean, there's been going back to the trust barometer and the Edelman study there's been a lot of outreach and a lot of positive pressure, I would say, on companies to, we're part of the Business Roundtable, which is a Washington lobbying group for corporations in the US. And they've been very much taking that responsibility of, look, we have a corporate responsibility to promote vaccination in order to get the country back going, in order to get people back out, in order to end a lot of the lockdown situations. So there's been a lot of expectation and pushing on companies to help promote that vaccination message in many ways, even as recently as this week, in terms of some things that are trying to be reactivated and promoted that way. So I think, we had our CEO participate in this Business Roundtable challenge, talking about what we've done to support the cause, how we encourage colleagues to vaccinate, and then challenging other CEOs to do the same thing. So I think there's a greater social expectation of companies to take positions on these kinds of issues and play a bigger role in it, and not sit back. But there is that balance of, you saying something to your colleagues is one thing, where's that tipping point where it becomes grandstanding or being opportunistic? And so, the roles that Lynn and I play are very much trying to find that right tipping point and not going over the line.
And we have to speak to multiple generations too. I mean, I think that the younger not to sound like an ageist, but the younger generations, certainly we're kind of already there in terms of, because they, studies show and that the younger workforce cares more about purpose. And it's forcing, Gen Xers like myself and also baby boomers to kind of rethink those priorities as well. And I mean, I feel like it's become more and more mainstream now. It wasn't just, oh, cancel culture this, or, I mean, I feel like it's transcended that. It's now part of the norm.
Right. One of the very strange parts of the pandemic has been all of the misinformation that's spreading, especially with the rapid fire spread of information through social media, conspiracy theories, things like the vaccine is not safe. Don't take the vaccine, and that you have science, you have healthcare workers who not only have to deal with the dangers of treating people or caring for people who might be afraid of going into hospital, any kind of a doctor's office, but then on top of it, they have to fight against this avalanche of this kind of misinformation. Do you think? Well, as a matter of fact, here's actually, honest to goodness, this happened today. I was taking my mother to an eye doctor, and she told me afterwards, and that the doctors were asking everybody if they're vaccinated, and they told her that once there was a person who came and said that, no, I don't want to be vaccinated because they track you with microchips in the vaccine. So should now healthcare be in partnership with public relations, and that part of should now effective communication be part of a doctor's practice, tactics on how to counter literally thousands of these crazy theories that so many people unfortunately fall for.
I mean, I think, having been in healthcare for a long time, I think effective communications as part of healthcare has been coupled forever, right? I mean, and I think that's important just even from a practical point of view in terms of public health and making sure that people understand how and what medicines can and can't do. I think what the last year has shown in spades, particularly for people on this call who are interested in communications, is just the incredibly important role of communications to society and the responsibility that it has with it. I said, I've worked in corporate communications for nearly 30 years, and this last year, in terms of not just the healthcare communications, but our colleague communications has never been so important and so valued by our company, and I think by society, in terms of understanding that there's a trust that comes with that, there's a responsibility that comes with effective communications, and just how powerful it can be when you've got people believing things like that chips are being put in their arms based on channels or messages or places that they're getting their information from because they believe it, even when science or other things make it seem totally insensible. It's amazing the power that those kinds of channels and communications can have. You really can it's been an amazing case study on just the power of communications. Total politics aside, whether Republican, Democrat, or whatever, the level of communications and how that cycle went from the last 18 months in terms of driving people's understanding of the vaccine, of the pandemic, how serious it should be, what was the spread going to be, what was the impact, how sensitive, how much people should be concerned. I mean, all of that was driven from, the pulpit of the White House, from a few, different spokespeople, and what, governors and whatever they had to say was driving, people's actions and behaviors, which ultimately driving actions and behaviors is what good communications is about, right? Driving actions and behaviors and influencing people to do hopefully good and important and healthy things. But it's been amazing to see all of that playing out in a way that's not in a classroom, not in a textbook, but real world and real impactful actions and consequences of communications. And you look at some of the people, you know, you can go to scores and different like that. Who did people trust? Who did they want to believe? It all came down to credibility of people's communications and what they could put their teeth into.
Speaking of keeping messages simple, I mean, I think part of the reason why Dr. Fauci was so beloved and trusted was because he didn't mince words, and he was he kept his language very, very simple, straight, and came across as a straight shooter. I think one thing that is, I guess, on the plus side, I would say, is that because people had more time, people were not more time, but people were at home. Media consumption just boomed during. I mean,
Sure.
people were absorbing news. I mean, whether or not, I think we still have a ways to go as far as trying to get Americans, generally speaking, on a healthy information diet. As far as being able, I mean, there's a lot of education that needs to be made as far as, who are genuine specialists and authorities that are speaking on certain things versus people who are just speculating and just, chiming in from the peanut gallery with no basis or foundation of true knowledge. I think people are starting to kind of sniff out what's real and what isn't. At least I hope so. I mean, maybe I'm a bit of a Pollyanna there, but I don't think that media, I do not believe in the demise of media. I do think that there are standard bearers out there, and that people are continually looking for those standard bearers to speak truth.
I think too, and one of the points you made about Fauci too is, you can look back in our careers, there's no tougher message to deliver than bad news.
Yeah.
No one likes to deliver bad news, but that's all that it was for a long time, was bad news. And you can hide and try to polish that up, as they like to say, here's the truth, now go varnish it and show me the varnished truth, right? Or the unvarnished truth. But there's nothing more difficult than delivering bad news, and every day, day after day. And when you look at the leaders and the messages that hopefully got won out the day, they were from leaders that could deliver bad news in a credible way, an honest and truthful way, and didn't try to polish it up too much. And I think that's one of the lessons that you have to take away from it and think about in terms of the power of communications.
So these are broad topics that I was hoping would be able to hit, and thank you for fantastic fantastic input. So maybe let me ask you, anything that we didn't touch on pandemic lessons that you would like to mention? And Christy, do we have any time after that to jump to any questions from the from our guests?
11 minutes. We have 11 minutes. And to the attendees, please feel free to use the Q&A function if you have any questions.
Yeah, so until somebody writes any questions, and anything that we didn't touch on pandemic lessons that you guys would like to mention.
I mean, I would reemphasize maybe some of the things that we've been talking about in terms of, at least for leadership communications, that authenticity and that empathy in communications. I've seen a lot of our leaders have to get out of their comfort zone in terms of that, and it's been a time when certain leaders who just are very comfortable in their own skin and very comfortable in it, it's been an opportunity for them to shine. For other leaders who may be less comfortable in that, it's been a real challenge, right? It's something that they've had to grow into and become more comfortable with. And so I think that's something that is a refreshing change, right? I mean, our leaders don't have to stand up there and pretend they have all the answers. I think people give their leaders a lot more credit for being authentic and transparent about where we are in a certain cycle or a certain issue, and while giving a hopeful message, giving a realistic message. And our CEO, Kristen Peck, was very, very, very open about being a working mother, during these challenges, having two teenagers at home and dealing with the homeschool situations and dealing with her pets having illnesses and how do you get them to the vet and things like that. And, you know, the own personal struggles in terms of health and wellness that people went through. And just the fact of her reaching out, being authentic about that, and also listening to colleagues and being very much reflecting back and mirroring to them what she was hearing from colleagues was greatly appreciated. For many of the months early on in the pandemic, we did a weekly letter from Kristen, and then also did a lot of town halls, virtual town halls, where she was, you know, from home visiting colleagues in different markets. And it gave her incredible confidence, incredible credibility as a new leader. She was a new CEO who came in right before the pandemic. And so I think that kind of communication style, that kind of communication strength is something that certainly, I think, shined during the pandemic, and something that a lot of leaders will take away from this period as things that they want to grow in terms of their leadership communications.
I mean, as a plug for our industry, communications strategists, PR, marketing, we all played a critical role during the pandemic. We were the linchpins for information. And I think it's really, really important for us to, continue to build the industry for the future. Really place an emphasis, a higher premium for truth, and just maintain the standards, or if not elevate standards as far as what stories should be told and what should be communicated and how. I think more and more it's really important. I mean, at least one reason why I ended up going into public relations is because, and this is no offense to folks, my advertising agency colleagues, is, while there is paid content out there, a lot of what we do is not easy. A lot of it is having to convince a reporter who then has to convince their editor, who has, that whatever, whatever message we're trying to put out or information we're trying to share is valid. I mean, that's one reason why I do have a specialty working with lawyers, for instance. I mean, almost every aspect of life, there's some kind of legal component to it, either from a labor and employment side, or if it's tech, having to do with like protecting patents. I mean, it could be, for life sciences, there are a huge host of implications there. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy what I do. We need more people in the industry. Mm-hmm. That will go beyond just being social media influencers. Although TikTok was the most downloaded app during the pandemic. I mean,
see, there we go. We need people in public relations, and yeah, this was a fantastic presentation. Thank you both so much, because not only can you see that this is really dynamic and exciting field to go into, but how important it is, and especially with a crisis that we lived through. That now you can see that you're doing a very, very important job as a skilled and ethical public relations practitioner, and that's what a program like ours is hoping to prepare future public relations specialists for. So definitely, if we have any questions for our panelists about the program, about anything, do write it into the chat, or you can follow up with me, get in touch with me, get in touch with Christy. Oh, here, Christy, do we have any questions, any comments?
No one put anything in the Q&A, but if anybody wants to talk, you can raise your hand in Zoom and I can click allow to talk. If anybody doesn't want to be shy.
Do not be shy.
Is this what class is like?
My agency is hiring, by the way. If anyone's looking for entry level or mid level, we're looking for good people. So feel free to connect with Barna or hit us up here at LAK.
We have graduates, actually a handful of very, very good students finishing the program right now. So I will definitely be in touch. Because yeah, we had people who were just at the commencement ceremonies. We have a couple of them are finishing up a class over the summer, but they are looking for positions. So absolutely, let's keep talking.
We do have a question.
Oh, okay, excellent.
If you were to give advice for communications management in the next major crisis, what 1 to 2 lessons would you impart in light of your experience during the pandemic?
Okay, each one of our panelists can jump in.
I'd say get your sleep now. It's a good one. Global pandemics don't have any off hours, so that's one lesson I might suggest. I think the other thing too is just I think the lesson of pace and flexibility. You've got to the speed of it, being able to react, pivot, change things was incredibly important during the pandemic, and I think very much required. And I also think maybe a third thing would be also just being candid. I think during that kind of situation, people look to public relations, they look to communications to be sort of that ear to the ground, that truth teller, and challenging things, challenging us to not be quiet when maybe it's easier to kind of ignore something or not go out there, challenging us not to make assumptions, challenging us to use language that's inclusive and sensitive to all the populations that we were trying to speak to at once. So I think that's something that's a key role of a communicator in any kind of crisis.
And continue to listen and assess and reassess. Just because you make one decision now, it doesn't mean you have to be able to leave room for change, because situations change quickly. I actually am an advocate for holding a beat. I don't think that people should, companies, people, individuals should drag their feet to dive into a crisis response necessarily. You have to do what makes sense and what needs to happen. Address what's immediate for your company. Don't try to ride the wave and just make a statement just because everyone else is making a statement, for instance. I think that's one mistake that some companies make, is they feel a pressure because they see their competitors chiming in. So, people are trying to rush to be first. And I mean, it's okay to be first, but it just needs to come from a place where it really does truly make sense for what your company does and for what, for the stakeholders that you're trying to engage.
Great answers, both of you. We have 2 minutes if anybody else wants to add another question in the Q&A.
Thank you for having us, by the way. This was a fun discussion.
Thank you for joining.
For joining us. This is fantastic. Thank you so much. And definitely, I will be in touch about our.
Yes, please, Barna. We are looking. We are looking. So feel free to send resumes my way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh.
All right. If there is nothing else, I think we can conclude the event. I think this was great. Thank you, Lynn and Bill and Barna, for being able to join in and do this.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Right. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.